Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's pre-show of our A+ 220 1201, our Core 1 study group. I am just unraveling cables. I am checking cameras. It's our pre-show. We get started at the top of the hour, so if you are joining us live, welcome. The chat is up and running. We've got folks checking in from all over. We've got our map up. We can kind of see where people are checking in from. I should probably turn this down. Hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to September, first day of the month. Perfect time to do a live stream. And here we are doing it. It's a busy time right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. So we're in constant motion on this side of the camera. And so in a way, it's kind of nice to just stop doing all of that. Oh, look, I got loose cables everywhere. It's nice to be able to stop doing that for a moment and do a live stream with you guys. So it's kind of nice. I just replaced a cable this morning, which violated one of my #1 rules of live streams, which is don't touch anything when you do a live stream. So I went and touched some stuff. So far, so good. It was just a USB charger. So it wasn't sort of one of those mission critical audio or video things. I needed my iPad to charge, so I had to run another cable. I have officially run out of USB interfaces. There you go. I think it's pretty much everybody, right? I have completely used up all of the USB interfaces. I commonly use the ones on the back of these monitors because that's what I use constantly. My Mac Studio is down below me. Oh, and I'm not even running my. Look at that. That's why we have these pre-shows, so I can start up the live stream and the recording. Now we see the recording going down here. That's super important, isn't it? There we go. Now we can put up the lower third for you guys. You know what I didn't do? I did not do the podcast intro, which normally happens prior to me going live, but for some reason today I am just out of practice, I guess. So you're gonna have to sit through this and enjoy it. Enjoy the dulcet sounds of me doing a podcast intro. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer A+ 220 1201 Core 1 study group. This study group was recorded on September 1st, 2026. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer A+ 220 1201 Core 1 Study Group After Show. This after show was recorded on September 1st, 2026. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. You would think I would have it memorized at this point. I think I do. I just sort of like having the text in front of me for some reason. Okay, so that part's done. The hard part of today is over. I have done the podcast intro. The rest of it's all downhill from here, really. Hope you guys are doing well. There was a question, how many live streams do we do in a month? We do usually about 4. We do a Core 1A+, a Core 2A+, we do a Network Plus, and we do a Security Plus. And you can see the dates for any live streams at professormesser.com/calendar, or look at the events channel in our Discord. Both of those are great places to go. We got it going on. I will be taking your questions in the after show. So as we are going through this live stream today and something hits you and you think, I sure would like an answer to this question, you can do that by going to the same URL that you see behind me, professormesser.com/QA. Not only is that the link to answer questions today, it's the link to submit questions for the after show. So we're good to go there. There's all A+. The A+ stuff is going along quite nicely. There's a lot happening right now on the Security Plus side because there's a new version of that coming out in November. So there's a lot of work right now being done on that. I'm shooting videos and editing videos and working on practice exams and working on course notes. And it's sort of the normal cycle of things. But for A+, what a good place we're in because nothing's changing anytime soon. So this is perfect. We have exactly the right content at exactly the right time for you to get that A+ certification, which is great. Oh, we are in good good shape here, I think. There's my 5-minute warning that I missed a minute ago. Recordings are going. I'm looking at this bar of video that's right here. We have these two big boxes in the top. That is my preview and my active. So you see whatever is in that window there. And I see what's coming up next right there. And if I hit a button, it would switch those, which is the beauty of a video switcher. And then I've got a list of all of the video inputs I have here. So I'm able to move around my video inputs, kind of get things ready to go, show something on the screen, maybe put a picture in there, and then I can go live with it like that. So that is what I end up doing. You don't get to see a lot of that behind the scenes, but that's what's happening behind the scenes as I work on these things. That's what all that, me moving around and hitting buttons and the noises, that's what all that is. That's what we're doing. We got about 3 minutes until we get started. And we will start our Core 1 study group. What else do we have? I think we're in an okay shape right now. The fact that we are shooting video in here constantly now makes the setup process much easier for me because everything is sort of in its place and the desk is relatively clean, relatively clean already. So it works out okay. But this is always, I'm doing this today. We'll be shooting video tomorrow. We got a live stream on Thursday. We'll be shooting video on Friday, shooting video on Saturday, shooting video on Sunday. And when I'm not shooting the video, I am editing the video. So there's now just constant motion. And the new Security Plus course is larger, slightly larger than the old version. So, we still have another 100 and something videos to shoot. We're still working on those things. But that's sort of the easy part. The hard part was up to that point. I know it sounds weird. Like the process of shooting the video isn't difficult. Well, it is time consuming, but because we are really working on content that is already set up. I've already written the content. It is already on the presentations. I've already got everything I need to be able to present this to a camera. So that's really the hardest part. It takes months to put together one of these courses. Months to put together a course. That's full-time work. Months to put together a course. So now that that's done, I feel like it's all downhill from here, even though there's a huge hill yet to climb. It's just, it's a different feel. If that makes sense. Okay, now I can see stuff. All right. Should you get a MacBook Pro? Of course you should get a MacBook Pro, just like this MacBook Pro. Maybe a newer model that doesn't have an Intel chip inside of it. I've got another MacBook Pro I use elsewhere that's not for presentations, not for the live streams. And it is just a monster. It's great. That's what we walk around with as security professionals in the field. So when I was working as a systems engineer, when I was designing security systems, implementing the security systems, doing firewall migrations, we all walked around with Macs because they're so flexible. They can do the Linux, Unix thing. You can run Windows on them. The virtualization capabilities are great. The chipset of the Mac is just amazing, ridiculous. There's some nice things about it. Now, I use everything, though. I use Windows. I use Mac OS. I use Linux. So you can come at me, but I use everything. I prefer my walking around and my daily driver, though, is Mac OS. Probably because, well, I know why it's Mac OS. It used to be Windows, and then I couldn't stop Windows from randomly rebooting whenever it wanted to. I would change the registry. I would make the settings. I would tell it never, never, never reboot unless I told you, and it would reboot. So that's the way it works. Hey, Mal, good to see you. Hope things are okay in St. Vincent. Are you guys getting any of that rain that's coming through? There was a little bit left over from Dolly, wasn't there? We're all watching this. For those of you that are from elsewhere in the world, if you're here in the Southeast United States, if you're in the Caribbean, if you're sort of in the northern part of South America, you're keeping an eye on the Atlantic at this point in time. That's the way it works. Yeah, it's kind of hot down here too. It's top of the hour. It's time to get started. Me and Malcolm just chatting. We're just going away. Hey, how you doing? Hope things are well. It's probably time to start a live stream. That's why you're all here. So let's do that, everybody. Let me see if I can remember what buttons to push, and we'll get this thing started. And away we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2026 Professor Messer 220-1201. That is our Core 1 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives, and we get to see in real time how you think these questions should be answered. So we get to really see what you know about the A+ certification. We have a lot to go through today. This is our first live stream of the month. It's always fun to go through and get some of these live streams going. What we tend to do on our live streams is start with a way that we can describe to you what we are doing with our Q&A today. There it is. If I bring up the right graphic, this, if you are here live, this is the link that you can use to answer questions on our live stream today. And I have for you a question that I have created that is really more of a question that you probably have seen before. So we're going to talk about what that question happens to be. We call this a rewind question because you've seen this question before, probably, if you've attended our live streams. But this is a way that we can check to see if we're able to connect to, answer questions, and do all of this online. And you would do that by using that URL that's at the bottom of your screen. Before I get into the questions and the answers, let me remind you of our standing rule, which is please do not answer the questions in the chat room. Please do not answer the questions in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that's right there on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Best place to go to answer these questions. Our question, our rewind question of the month, is an employee is connecting to a device using a lightning cable. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this connection? Would it be to back up an iPad, use an LCD projector, connect an external hard drive to Mac OS, charge an Android phone, or connect an external speaker? Those are all things you can do, but which one applies to this question? If you think you know the answer, use that link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. We're going to come back to that question in just a moment and see how well you did with that rewind question. I'm curious because this is not a rewind question from last month. This is a number of months ago. So we're going to see how well we remember that one. It's kind of fun for me anyway. Thank you so much for being here. We do these study groups every month. It would be a very quiet and uneventful study group if you were not here. So thank you so much for taking some time away, hanging out with us, and learning a little bit more about the A+ topics. We have, of course, our live, our recorded video course. Anything we're not doing on a live stream, we have an on-demand training for A+, for Network+, for Security+. It's all on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can find that at professormesser.com/YouTube. Of course, we have our daily A+ pop quiz questions. We post those to X and Instagram. We also post them to LinkedIn and Facebook. We try to put them wherever you happen to be. And if you are here after we are done today, you might want to join the thousands of other folks that have joined our Discord server. That's, of course, at professormesser.com/Discord. That's where I'll be after this. And it's a great way to network, ask questions, and talk to other people who are also studying for their IT certifications. Also let you know that sometime in this first hour, I will give you information on how you could earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Now, if you don't know what that is, it probably doesn't apply to you, but if you are using Continuing Education Unit Credits, CEUs, to be able to renew your certification, then you'll want to listen up for this sometime in this first hour. Hopefully, I will remember to give you that information in the first hour. Now, hopefully, I will. Now, maybe I've reminded myself. We'll see if that comes to fruition. Another good reason to watch. Of course, today we're going to talk about the A+ exam. And as I mentioned in the pre-show, if you weren't here, the current versions of the A+ exams are the 220-1201 and the 220-1202. You might also see these referred to as V15. I'm not sure why we have multiple version numbers for this, but at least we know we're all on the same page. This is a series of exams that were released on March 25th of 2025. So in the cycle of examinations that CompTIA does, they update these, and these tend to retire about every 3.5 years. So because of that, we have plenty of time before this exam goes away. The estimated retirement dates for this exam are September of 2028. So if you are sitting here in September of 2026, you got 2 years left, which is plenty of time to be able to take the A+ exams, earn your A+. You'll be doing other stuff by then. You'll have already gotten other certifications by the time September 2028 comes around. So that's a good thing for all of us. The information we're studying today will be good at least for another 2 years, probably well after that as well. We have 90 minutes for each one of these exams. That's how much time you have to complete the exams. You will get a maximum of 90 questions on these exams. It might be fewer than 90. And the score you're looking for in the 1201 is a 675 on that scale from 100 to 900. On the 1202, you need to do a little bit better. You need a 700 on that same scale between 100 and 900. Once you pass your exam, I know we just talked about retirement dates and different issues there, but the good part about this, the thing that you should be aware of, is that once you pass your exam, you're now certified for 3 years. So it doesn't matter what they do with the exam versions, how they change the exam numbers. Once you're certified, the exam numbers really don't mean anything to you. You've already passed your exams. So that's a good thing to keep in mind as well, that you're locked in for 3 years at that point, which is always a good thing. Of course, on this study group, we have a lot of questions that we do. We have things we do in the after show. This is live. It's something that sometimes things change. We never know exactly what's going to happen on our live streams. So of course, when you go to our YouTube video description today, there's not much there. But about 24 hours from now, my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this, she is going to go through this live stream. She is watching the replay, and she is putting in all of the timestamps you need to understand where the questions are, where the answers are, what are people asking in the after show. If that's something that you use, that you like, make sure you hit a heart in the chat so that Lori can see on the replay all of this going by. And of course, this is something that helps everybody find exactly what they need, and you can go back years to be able to find this information. Thank you, Lori, for doing this, and make sure you find that on our YouTube video description. Also let you know, as I've already mentioned, our Discord is available for you. It is public. It is open. There's no charge. There's no fees. You just show up, and you can talk to other people about their A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus certification or other certs. You can even open up your own chat room, manage it, have a lot of people come in. You're the one that decides who gets to enter the room. You can kick people out of the room, and everybody can make their own ad hoc study room at any time. We'd love to have you join us if you aren't there already. You can find us at professormesser.com/discord. Also let you know that eventually you will need to take your A+ exam. If you are in the U.S., Canada, or U.S. territory, we have discounted vouchers on our site that can save you some money. These are exactly the same vouchers you can get over at the CompTIA website, but you're not paying the same prices they have over at the CompTIA website. We're able to do this because we are a platinum partner, one of the few from CompTIA worldwide. And this is something we like to pass along those savings to you to at least save you a little bit of money during this certification process. If you do purchase a voucher on our site, you even get something a little extra that you can't get anywhere else, and that's a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook we do not sell. It is only available exclusively with the vouchers that we have here or a success bundle that we have on our website. Those are the only two places where you can get that. Is included by default. You can simply download that immediately after purchasing your voucher. So another one of those things that might help you if you are in this weird business of trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for this? How are we going to find these vouchers? And then how am I going to study for this exam? We've got you covered. We are definitely there. You can find out more at professormesser.com/vouchers. So let's talk about the question we asked just a little bit ago. That question is, an employee is connecting to a device using a lightning cable. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this connection? Is it back up an iPad, use an LCD projector, connect an external hard drive to Mac OS, charge an Android phone, or connect an external speaker? So you've got a lot to work through there. There's a few options, but which one is the right one? Let's close our poll and find what you selected. You can see that 77% of you said you would use this to back up an iPad. 11% said to connect an external drive to Mac OS. 11% said to charge an Android phone. And only 1% said to use an LCD projector, and only 0% said connect to an external speaker. Well, we're specifically talking about Lightning, which you don't see. Well, I still see quite a bit of Lightning. I have people in my home that still have phones that have Lightning connectors. I'm trying to upgrade them. I really am. They don't want to upgrade. This is the scenario we find ourselves in as IT professionals, because we have to not only support the newest things on the planet, we also have to support the things that people are still walking around with. That's an important part of our job. And something we always have to consider is that sometimes it's not about the newest things, it's about the things we use every day. And Lightning connectors is one of those examples of things that people use every day. It's a proprietary cable. It is Apple products only, and you'll find those on iPhones, iPads, and that's sort of it. Obviously, now we have migrated away. The Lightning cables, the Lightning connection was created because USB was not really working for our mobile phones. I think we could all agree with that. But now that USB hasn't been updated with new interfaces like the USB-C connection, that we can now have a single connection that we can apply really for almost everything we use, until the point, of course, where you run out of USB-C ports on the back of your computer. Welcome to my world. This is a great connection type if you are trying to provide connectivity between your computer and your iPhone or iPad. Now, why would you need that? Well, charging is one good use of this. You can use that as a charging cable for your device, but that wasn't the question, was it? There was no option here for charging your phone. All it said was that we're connecting to a device using a Lightning cable. Now, if you look at all of the different options available, Lightning cables are not used to connect to external speakers. So 0% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. 1% said to use an LCD projector. And although there may be some video output capabilities in a Lightning cable, that is not commonly what we use to connect to an LCD projector. We also don't use Lightning very commonly on Mac OS, especially for things like hard drive, external hard drive connections. Those would be a better choice for either a native USB-C or perhaps even probably more common, especially on Mac OS, something like a connection for Thunderbolt would probably be. I have a lot of Thunderbolt connections just here in the studio for doing those exactly. And 11% said to charge an Android phone. As we've already seen, the Lightning connector was exclusive and proprietary to Apple. Therefore, you would not find a Lightning connection on an Android phone. If you do, something very sneaky is going on. You probably don't really have an Android phone. So another one of those that sounds good, but not the answer we were looking for. What we were looking for was the 77% of you that said back up an iPad. That is exactly what you would do with a Lightning port, because it does provide some data connectivity between an iPhone or iPad back to your computer. And you can use a number of different methods to be able to back up data off of that device using that Lightning connection. So hopefully that gives you some perspective of Lightning and the things you would do with it. These days, of course, we've migrated almost everything away from this crazy mix of cables into more of a USB-C connection, thankfully. And again, it's an advantage to have that functionality. I look for everything with USB-C today. I think most people do. And if it doesn't, if it has some other type of connection, I'm going to the next product. So I'm now running out of USB connections, but I got plenty of chargers. Apparently, that's what we're doing. Working with those as well. So you did great on our rewind question. Thank you for getting in there, connecting to those. We now know that we're able to answer questions. So now let's get to the meat of our study group, and let's start with a brand new question. And this is more than just a multiple choice question. This next question is a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are questions that are anything but multiple choice. So this could be a fill in the blank. It could be working at a command prompt. It could be a drag and drop question. It could be a matching question. You could put things in a particular order. It becomes a little bit of a challenge because performance-based questions don't have a set structure. I think a lot of people get concerned over this, but in reality, you don't have to be concerned as long as you know the exam objectives. It doesn't matter how they ask the question, you will know the answer. And I have for you a performance-based question of the month right now. Brand new question that is right here. This question is about DNS. So this DNS question is choose the right DNS record addition or change to resolve the addition or change to resolve the following help desk tickets. It's always the grammar part that trips me up. Available records are A, quad A, CNAME, MX, and TXT. There we go. So we've got that there. We have 5 different tickets that have been opened. I want to know which DNS record is the one that is going to be the best one to solve this particular problem. And of course, as always, our answers should be submitted at the link at the bottom of the screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Let's start with the very first ticket, which says the company's mail server signs messages with the DKIM selector, but receiving servers cannot locate the public key. Which DNS record will allow us to correct that issue? The next one is management wants portal.professormesser.com to direct users to the same host name as www.professormesser.com. Administrators do not want to maintain separate IP address records for both names. Therefore, we would need this kind of DNS record. That's what our second question is. The third question is, users who enter www.professormesser.com are sent to the retired IPv4 web server. The website must resolve directly to the new IP address. So how are we going to fix that? What DNS record would resolve that problem? Fourth one on our list is external mail systems cannot determine which server accepts messages for professormesser.com. The designated server is mail.professormesser.com. All right, well, how do we fix that? That would be a bad thing. You would probably get a phone call if your mail wasn't working properly. We recently did a mail server migration at professormesser.com. It went seamlessly. We lost no email messages, which is always a good thing. And I did have to make DNS changes for those. Next on our list, both next and last, is the company website works over IPv4, but IPv6 only clients cannot resolve the web server's IPv6 address. But we can fix that. But how would we fix that? Which DNS record would allow us to fix that? That is our fifth answer we were looking for. And again, if you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Submit your answer for each of these DNS records. One good thing about this particular question, I made it a little bit easier than an actual exam, which I think may be good or may be bad, because there are 5 records up here, the A, the quad A, the CNAME, the MX, and the TXT. There are also 5 tickets. So you only need one of these for each ticket. You will not be reusing these across different tickets. 1-to-1 is what we're looking for. On the actual exam, you tend to get questions that have multiple links or multiple options available. So you might get 5 tickets, but there might be 9 possible answers. That's a little bit more of a challenge to work through those. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of that. I would like you to submit those questions on the Discord. You can submit those now. I've finally opened it up. After talking this whole time, I finally opened it up. So you can put in what you think the answer might be for these, and maybe that would be something to work through. Thank you, chat. The chat room's got my back. Thank you for letting me know about those. That's the beauty of a live stream, of course, and a lot of buttons. For those of you that haven't seen this, this plethora of connectivity, this cornucopia of buttons to push, there's a lot here to work through. And they're all colored, and we'll figure it out. We'll get there eventually. We will make it happen. Lock in your answer at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. I was doing some work in the studio prior to the live stream. I changed some cables around. I vacuumed some things out that needed to be vacuumed. You knew it was bad if I did that just prior to a live stream. So I'm just happy to have everything working. So let's see how you did with this question. Let's break down each one of these answers and see if what I think the right DNS record is matches what you think the right DNS record is. We're going to start with our very first ticket, which says the company's mail server signs messages with the DKIM selector, whatever that is, and receiving servers cannot locate the public key. How could we fix this problem? Well, anytime you see something relating to DKIM, something relating to SPF, something relating to DMARC, those are abbreviations associated with email security. There are email settings that we need to put in our DNS server that can confirm that not only are the messages being sent from an authorized mail server, but we can also work through this public key with a digital signature on each of our messages that we send out. So that part of it works fantastic to be able to work through. Let's see if this is something that you got right. The answer on this one would be the text record, TXT. This allows us to put, well, practically any type of text in that DNS. The text record is one that can really keep a lot of different types of variables in this mix. The TXT record is a good one to have confirmations that a DNS server is under your control. You would have email settings in here. There's very often other security options that would go in TXT. It's almost a catch-all for a lot of different capabilities. And thankfully, we're able to do that through our DNS server. The next record or the next ticket that we were trying to resolve is that management wants portal.professormesser.com to direct users to the same host name as www.professormesser.com. And administrators, which would be me, do not want to maintain separate IP address records for both names, which is absolutely true. We do not want that on that list. So in that particular case, we would use a CNAME, a canonical name record. This is exactly what the CNAME is built for, so that you could have a single device that might have a large number of names associated with it. So my www server might also be my FTP server. It might also be my mail server. It might also be an SSH server. It might also have a number of other services running on it. So instead of having separate individual IP address records, imagine having 10 of these in your DNS server. And let's say that the IP address of that particular server changes one day, which happens. Do you want to update 10 individual records in your DNS server, or do you want to update one record? And the answer, of course, is one record. And that one record is the CNAME record, which points you to the actual server so that you only have to make the change in one place rather than making the change in many different places on your DNS server. This is pretty important because the one thing you don't want to do with DNS is make a mistake. And the more changes you make, the more potential, the more opportunity there is to have a problem with that particular configuration. You make a misspelling, you don't catch it, it gets pushed out, and now that could create significant problems. So CNAME can be a really nice help from management perspective, from a scaling perspective, and from just keeping things up and running. Next on our list is a ticket that asks or says that users who enter www.professormesser.com are sent to the retired IPv4 web server. This is actually taken right from the headlines because earlier this year, we converted from one web server to a different one, a completely different IP address. Now the website must resolve directly to the new IP address. That means I needed to change something in my DNS for that to happen. What did I need to change? I needed to change my address record, and that is a simple A record. That's specifically an IPv4 address record, and IPv4, of course, was specifically mentioned in that question. That is not IPv6, only IPv4 with that single A. We'll get to IPv6 in just a moment. Our next ticket is external mail systems cannot determine which server accepts messages for ProfessorMesser.com. This would be very bad if this was to actually happen. The designated server is mail.professormesser.com. Well, how do we tell the world where our mail server is? Well, we need to put a new record in our DNS or correct the record in our DNS that points to MX. That is the mail exchange record. That is the record that tells everybody in the world where our email server is, which means if you have the wrong IP address or name in that record, well, then you're in trouble because nobody would be able to send you any email, and that would make me very sad. We do not want that to happen. Email is probably one of the most important applications that most organizations run, even though they don't often think of it that way. So you have to really make sure that these records in your DNS server are correct and pointing to the right place. And our last ticket is the company website works over IPv4, but IPv6 only clients cannot resolve to the web server's IPv6 address. Well, there's only one record left, right? There's only one thing we didn't use, and that's the Quad A record, AAAA. That is the record that designates an address record, but the addresses are IPv6 addresses and not IPv4 addresses. So you have to make sure you put the right addresses on the right records. You can't put an IPv6 address on an A record and an IPv4 address on a Quad A record. You have to make sure they are in the right place to be able to do that. Why do we do a Quad A and not just a double A, AA? Well, we really wanted to make sure IPv6 was clear and obvious in the DNS. So Quad A is what we are using for IPv6. Those are the answers that we were looking for. The company's mail server signing messages with DKIM, but receiving servers not able to locate the public key. Well, you need an updated text record specifically for the DKIM location, or having the DKIM public key as part of that text record. We have management wants portal.professormesser.com to direct users to the same host name as www.professormesser.com. We need a canonical name record, a CNAME. We also have users who enter www.professormesser.com are sent to the retired IPv4 web server, which means we need to update that IPv4 address with an A record. External mail systems trying to find the right mail server need to look for an MX record. And as we've already seen, IPv6 uses a Quad A record to specify an IPv6 address. Those are, as far as the A+ exam is concerned, those are the only DNS records you need to know for the 1201 exam. So we have covered everything you need to know about IPv6 records right there. If you got all of them right, I think you are probably just fine for that section, which happens to be on the 1201 exam in section 2.4. And that is, if you wanted to look at the video that is associated with these records, the video name in our index is called DNS configuration. If you got all of those right, you're doing great with DNS. As always, and I like to say this whenever we talk about DNS, do not make DNS changes to your DNS configurations unless you really, really know what you're doing. You can make significant problems for yourself by making changes, submitting them to DNS. Sometimes these changes are very difficult to reverse. So make sure when you are making DNS changes that you are very, very sure you've done all the testing. You've maybe had a couple people look at it. You've verified the configuration. I've been through some DNS tragedies. So make sure that you are not one of those statistics. Before you make any changes to DNS, make sure you follow best practices and that you're able to make those changes and roll them back without a problem. That is our performance-based question of the month. Let's now move into multiple choice questions of the month. The next question we have is this one, and it asks, a workstation starts to emit a loud, methodical clicking sound whenever the system is under heavy load. Which of the following is the most likely source of this noise? Is it an obstruction or debris interfering with a cooling fan? Is it a failing SSD controller? Is it electromagnetic interference from nearby speakers? Is it a depleted CMOS battery leaking current to the chassis? Or is the BIOS searching for a valid boot signature? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. I'll always also remind you that we are taking your questions in the after show right after we're done in this first hour. Our second hour is always questions from you. So during this process, if you think about a question you would like to ask, I've seen a couple go by in the chat. We're not addressing questions in the chat at this point, but if you have questions, you can submit those. Instead of submitting to the chat, submit them to that link on your screen. There's a little tab at the top where you're able to select between answering questions and asking questions. You can do that at any time. That's a good one to try. Of course, you can always answer the current question from the same link. Go to professormaster.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This should be good. This is one, I think if you're ever someone working with these systems, and one of the parts of troubleshooting on the A+ exam is about clicking noises. And the reason we have that in the exam objectives is that it's a very common problem, something we often have to deal with. So you do need to understand where these potential sounds may be coming from. Sometimes they're very obvious. Sometimes they are not very obvious. So I want to see which one of these you think the answer might be. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a workstation starts to emit a loud, methodical clicking sound whenever the system is under heavy load. Which of the following is the most likely source of this noise? Is it an obstruction or debris interfering with a cooling fan? Is it a failing SSD controller? Is it electromagnetic interference from nearby speakers? Is it a depleted CMOS battery leaking current to the chassis? Or is the BIOS searching for a valid boot signature? Let's close the poll and see what you think the answer is. 82% of you think it's an obstruction or debris. But we got double digits. 12% of you say it's a failing SSD controller. We also have 5% of you that say the BIOS is searching for a valid boot signature. 1% say a depleted CMOS battery leaking current to the chassis. And then 0%, again, the 0% of you coming through with electromagnetic interference from nearby speakers. I think many of us are familiar with the electromagnetic interference, and we know, okay, that's not it. That's not the clicking sound that we're talking about under a heavy load. So what is the answer for this? Clicking noises, as I mentioned, are not something we want to have in our computer. We don't want them to start humming. We don't want them to clicking. We certainly don't want things rattling inside of a laptop case or inside of a desktop case. These are things we're trying to avoid. And as more and more and more of our systems become solid state, which means there are no moving parts inside of it, we have fewer and fewer of these problems to deal with. But if you have a desktop computer, you have something that has hard drives inside of it, spinning fans, not everything is solid state. Things are going to fail and things are going to have problems, and there are going to be clicking noises and there's going to be humming. And where do we find all of these? Clicking problems tend to point towards a fan issue these days, especially since we don't tend to have spinning hard drives in a lot of our systems any longer. So when you deal with that type of issue, the only thing that may be moving inside of your computer is indeed a fan. It might be a fan on your CPU. It might be a fan on the case. It might be a fan on a different component. A lot of different things can happen there. And indeed, the 82% of you that said, yeah, it's probably a fan. There's probably something stuck in that fan. The reason we start to hear it more whenever the system is under a heavy load is that the fans tend to spin up as things get hotter. And so you will certainly see things with fans become more apparent as the fans start spinning faster, which I guess makes perfect sense. There are other pieces in here that we did consider. 12% of you said it's a failing SSD controller. An SSD controller is a solid state component. There's no moving parts there. As the system gets busier, you really don't see much change to the volume or the sounds that are generated by a hard drive or solid state drive controller. We also have 5% that said the BIOS is searching for a valid boot signature. That is a software function, so we don't tend to see that creating any noise inside of our computer. A depleted CMOS battery leaking current to the chassis. We don't tend to also see leaking batteries with these, but if we did, and it did leak current to the chassis, then it probably wouldn't be making any noise in that scenario. If anything, it just wouldn't be keeping our date and time when we started up our computer. And only 0% of you said the electromagnetic interference from nearby speakers. We probably heard that before if you get, especially the older style phones, but even the newer ones do this to some degree. If you get near a component, the common mode overload from that radio signal that is being transmitted and received by that device can, in some cases, create interference with third-party devices. So in that particular case, I guess it could be considered maybe a noisemaker, but not in the way that we have here, which is the only time we really see that is under heavy load. If this was really a problem with your phone, this would be happening all the time when your phone was sending and receiving. So not exactly the issue we were looking for. The most likely answer of all of these is the one that 82% of you chose, and that is an obstruction or debris or something is causing that fan to click. If it's my computer, I've done a bad job of cable management. Now a cable is hitting the fan, so you have to go inside of your computer and tie everything back down and do a better job the second time, which is probably not the process you want to go through, but eventually you will find that particular noise. If you want more information on this, that is from our section 5.1 troubleshooting hardware video, where we talk about troubleshooting these clicking noises and so many other things. Of course, if you look at the A+ exam objectives, they are huge. There's an amazing amount of content on these two exams, everything from hardware to operating systems and Linux and Mac OS, your troubleshooting networks, you're learning about security. There's cloud-based technologies. There's AI topics on here. There's a lot in the A+ exam. And if you watch all of our videos, that means that you watched 137 videos over 19 hours of content. Obviously, a very comprehensive course. One of the things you can do is, as you're going through all 137 videos, is to write some notes and make some comments on the things that you're watching on the video. But I realize not everybody has time to look at 137 videos, although I would really appreciate it if you did. There is that practical part of this that always comes into play. So one of the things I did was create a set of notes that covers everything that's in the video. So if you go, for example, this is my course notes. This is the PDF version of these. We also have physical versions of these as well. Obviously, the physical version is identical to the software-based PDF version that you see in front of you. And this contains a breakdown of every video in the same order that you find them on the website, in the same order as the official exam objectives, where I take all of the text from the video, all of the important graphics, all of the important images, and I put them into this document. So if you're looking for something that takes all of that key information and puts it in a single place, then you'll probably want to look at our course notes. Not only do the course notes are available, not only are they available for the Core 1 exam, we also have course notes for the Core 2 exam. So we got plenty to go through as well. And if you get them both at the same time, you actually save a little bit of money in there. They can also be bought in conjunction with our practice exams, which we'll talk about later on in the study group. All of these are available on our website. If you'd like to learn more, you can find those at professormesser.com/1201notes. Let's get back to our Q&A, shall we? Next on our list is this question, and it asks, a remote user needs to provide internet access to their laptop and tablet simultaneously using only their smartphone's cellular data. Which feature should they enable to provide this functionality? Should that be tethering, Bluetooth pairing, NFC connections, mobile hotspot, or cellular roaming? So we need to think about this one a little bit more. Let's see which one of these you think the best answer is. The question asks, a remote user needs to provide internet access to their laptop and tablet simultaneously using only their smartphone's cellular data. Which feature should they enable to provide this functionality? Is it tethering, Bluetooth pairing, NFC connections, mobile hotspot, or cellular roaming? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, use the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Hopefully, you're familiar with some of these technologies. A more challenging part of this is that all of these technologies are listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives. So all of these are probably something you're familiar with or that you've seen, but which one really fits with the scenario that we've been faced with here? Hopefully you're familiar with that. Lock in your answer at any time using the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Lock that in. These are questions, of course, that you should think about. They should cause you to at least step through a process. And that's what the exam is mostly about. You probably are not going to get a lot of underhanded pitches on this exam. You probably don't get very straightforward questions on the CompTIA exam. They tend to be more of these scenario type questions that you have to think through to find the right answer of what we're looking for. So as you're going through your studies, you should always not just think about what it is, but think about how it works, because that will be very important for your exam. Next, let's see how we did with this one. The question again asks, a remote user needs to provide internet access to their laptop and tablet simultaneously using only their smartphone's cellular data. Which feature should they enable to provide this functionality? Should they use tethering, Bluetooth pairing, NFC connections, mobile hotspot, or cellular roaming? Let's see what you chose. I'm thinking big numbers for this one. How did we do? We got 2 big numbers. This very unusual set of answers here. 85% of you said you would use a mobile hotspot. 15% of you said tethering, and then no other answers were chosen. Nobody said Bluetooth pairing. Nobody said NFC connections, and nobody said cellular roaming. So there's your challenge in working through these is how do you find an answer? Well, there's only 2 to choose from here. It's one of those 2. Now, if we go with the majority of you, 85% of you said the answer is a mobile hotspot. 15% said tethering. Isn't that the same thing? Well, actually, no, it isn't. And so let's talk about what those might actually be. We look at the hotspot function on your phone. This is the hotspot function on my phone, where you can turn on a personal hotspot. So you're effectively turning your phone into a wireless router. That's basically what you're doing there. It will perform network address translation. It sends information to the internet. You've now got everything you need on your phone to make this craziness all work through a single device. This is really quite a lifesaver if you need this. If you've never used this function on your phone, you might want to see if this is something available for your particular phone provider. Not all providers provide this functionality. It is dependent on your provider. Some providers provide this for free. Sometimes this is included in the plan that you're using. Sometimes it's an extra cost per month to have this functionality. Sometimes it's a pay for how much you use. So the more you use it, the more it costs money, that type of thing. But this is a way that you could, and this is the key with a mobile hotspot, is that multiple devices are able to connect to your phone and then to the internet using 802.11, using Wi-Fi. So that's why this makes a very good use, a hotspot use, if you have multiple devices, because you can support many, many devices simply using your phone to connect to the internet. And again, a huge lifesaver to have that. Well, what's the difference then in tethering? A tethering is one where you can connect your computer, your laptop to your phone and use your phone as an internet connection. Isn't that what we just said? Isn't that the same thing as a mobile hotspot? Well, I guess from that description it is, but the common difference between tethering and an NFC connection is with tethering, we are usually taking one device and connecting it to one phone that is then connecting to the internet. Usually it's not using multiple devices. That tether between your laptop and your phone commonly uses either a USB connection, maybe USB-C or Lightning, or more commonly these days, we connect from our laptop to the phone with Bluetooth, and then the phone connects to the internet over the cellular network that your phone is connected to. So there's the difference. There's the key, is that tethering tends to be a one-to-one connection, one device connecting to your phone to use the internet, whereas a mobile hotspot are multiple devices connecting to your phone to use the internet. So the end point, the end game of this is that we're connecting to the internet. The part that really differentiates between those two is hotspot is for many devices, a tether is for generally a single device. And in this question, we needed to provide internet access to the laptop and tablet simultaneously using our smartphone, which means more than one device. Therefore, we are dealing with a mobile hotspot, and that would be the answer that we were looking for. If you're one of the 85% of you that chose mobile hotspot, you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit and need to collect these credits to renew your A+ certification, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that CEU is you would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You would click the link that says Contact Us. It brings up a form where you can put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put September 2026 A+ Core 1 or something close to that. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, mobile hotspot tethering. It's really 3 super secret code words of the month, mobile hotspot tethering, as if this couldn't be more confusing. And you can also put anything else you would like into that message. I do read through every single one of these, and I enjoy reading through all of those and like to hear where your A+ studies have taken you, what you're working on now, the things you, especially if you're sending me a CEU request, you're probably already A+ certified. It'd be great to hear how you were able to use that as well. Again, if you would like to earn that email, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In the form that comes up, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put September 2026 Core 1. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, mobile hotspot tethering. Mobile hotspot tethering. You only have to do it one time. I did it twice to emphasize those words. That's why I repeated it. So that is how you can earn that email. It takes me about a week to turn these around and get them back to you. Sometimes I do it a little bit faster. For those of you that just got your updates recently, it took a little bit longer, but I got them to you. And now the queue's relatively empty. So now's the time to get in there. That's exactly where you want to go to put those in place. Hopefully this is something where if you're collecting CEUs, this can help you as well. I realize not everybody uses CEUs for renewals. But this is something that can help you if you are doing that. Let's keep going. More questions, shall we? Absolutely. Let's do another question. How about something that's more network related? Here we go with our network configuration question. This question asks, a network technician is tasked with connecting 2 departments which reside on different IP subnets within a large corporate office. Which of the following would be the best choice for connecting these networks? Would it be proxy, router, access point, ONT, or switch? A network technician is tasked with connecting 2 departments which reside on different IP subnets within a large corporate office. Which of the following would be the best choice for connecting these networks? Would it be a proxy, a router, an access point, an ONT, or a switch? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. I'll have to see what you think the answer is on this one. We've been doing really well so far. Our numbers have been really good so far with these questions and these answers. Let's see if we can keep that trend going. I love good numbers when we're doing Q&A, when we're going over these relatively common answers here. A lot of these have a lot of similarities between them, so you really have to partition them out. Again, all of the answers on this one are directly from the exam objectives. So if you think you really know the answer, you've locked yourself in, you say, yep, that's the answer I'm looking for, make sure you also go through the other devices as well and that you understand what those do. You may know that they don't apply here, but where do they apply? Because on your exam, you might get a question asking about how some of these other technologies apply. In the case of our live streams here, I do of course, have a single answer we work with, but that's why I go through all of the answers so that we can really understand why that would or would not be the right answer in this particular case. So let's do that right now. Let's look at this question, which asks, a network technician is tasked with connecting 2 departments which reside on different IP subnets within a large corporate office. Which of the following would be the best choice for connecting these networks? Would it be a proxy, a router, an access point, an ONT, or a switch? Let's close our poll and see how you did. And we got a little bit of a rainbow this time. We did not get a majority answer. In this case, we didn't even come close to a majority answer, really. The highest number we got, the plurality of you, 39% said the answer is a router. 34% said the answer is a switch. We have 16% that say an access point, 8% say a proxy, and only 3% said an ONT, an optical network terminal. What would you use then if you were trying to connect different IP subnets on anybody's network? Well, you would use what the plurality of you chose. 39% of you said a router, and I think that would be your best answer in this case. In fact, that's the only answer that really applies here, is a router. The router's responsibility is to forward traffic based on a layer 3 or an IP address destination. And when you're working through challenges with connectivity, you do have to understand, am I connecting different IP subnets, or am I connecting the same IP subnet with each other? That's the part that is pretty important to consider, because you would choose a different device depending on exactly what you were doing. A single broadcast domain would be connected to a switch. Multiple broadcast domains or multiple IP subnets would be connected using a router. Sometimes you hear this as a layer 3 device because routers operate at OSI layer 3. That's a little bit outside the scope of the A+ exam, but that term tends to come up from time to time. Anytime you see a layer 3 device, that means there's routing functionality within that device. So if you are connecting not just different IP subnets, but IP subnets that are across multiple topologies, this is also where we would use a router. So if you have a fiber connection coming in from an ISP and you need to connect it to the copper connections inside of your internal network, well, now you've got a router sitting in the middle that can not only connect different IP subnets, but it converts between those topology types inside the router itself. That seems like it would be relatively easy to do, but in reality, there are some complexities when you're moving from one type of network design to a different one. There's different data link control addresses. It has a different header in each of those topology types. That header has to be translated between different connections. That's really where we're focusing on when we think about how to connect up different devices. Routers is exactly the answer that we were looking for. In this particular case, 39% of you chose router, and in that case, 39% of you got that one absolutely correct. Now, why would it not have been a switch? 34% of you, almost the same amount as router, said switch. We're very accustomed to plugging into a switch. When we connect our laptops, we connect our desktop computers. The switch itself is one that connects devices that are generally on the same broadcast domain. We do not commonly use a switch to connect two separate IP subnets to each other. A switch doesn't do that. A switch forwards traffic based on a MAC address. A router forwards traffic based on an IP address. So very different uses on how they communicate. The only time you would probably see someone argue over this one is if the switch was a layer 3 switch. There's no such thing as a layer 3 switch, just as there's no such thing as a layer 2 router. Those don't exist. That is just a marketing term that somebody made up. A layer 3 switch is a switch that also has inside of it a router. So now we're back to a router. If you're connecting multiple IP subnets using a layer 3 switch, you're actually using a router. That's what they don't tell you. Layer 3 switches aren't real. It's just a marketing term that a bunch of people that weren't networking people sat in a room and figured out and came up with a name. But the name was really good and the name stuck. So I like that we have a term for this. What I don't like is we don't really explain what that means. So a lot of people think a layer 3 switch is a switch operating at an IP address level. No, it is not. It is a switch that has stuck inside of it. We jammed inside of it a router. It's almost the same as having a separate switch and a separate router, but instead of having two devices, we just stuck them in the same chassis. That's all a layer 3 switch really is. So anytime you see a layer 3 switch, think of it as two separate devices. It is not only a switch, it also is a router in the same piece of equipment. As long as you do that, it keeps everybody straight, keeps everything correct, and you'll be doing just fine. So in this case, would not be a switch. 16% of you said an access point. An access point is effectively a switch, but for wireless networks. It works effectively the same way. Access points forward traffic based on the MAC address or the physical address of these different wireless devices. It does not connect different IP subnets to each other. access points are not designed to connect different IP subnets to each other, so we could not use an access point in the same way that we could not use a switch. 8% of you said a proxy. Proxies tend to operate either at a layer 3 level, more commonly it seems at an application level, although commonly is sort of a bad term to use with proxies because the use of a proxy has limited use in today's modern networks. Proxies were sort of the old style of security on our networks where you had an intermediary making connections for you across the internet, examining the information that we have come in, and then providing that down to an individual device. It's a middleman that was stopping the connection and making the communication for you. From a security perspective, you would think that would be great to have something sitting in the middle and you never directly touch those servers that are out on the internet. But the reality is there are so many different applications. And of course, today with the encryption methods that we use and the performance that we require, proxies don't tend to be used on our modern networks, certainly not in the way that we used to. There are some proxies that we use as a single use or a corner case proxy. For example, if you're doing SSL decryption, which is a capability built into many next generation firewalls these days, where it will decrypt your SSL traffic on the inbound, make sure that everything is okay, and then send you the encrypted data. That functionality is one that uses a proxy built into your next generation firewall, but only for SSL, not for anything else. So you can see it's a very specific use case to use a proxy on a network these days. And the last option that really only 3% of you chose was an ONT. No, not like an uncle and an aunt. We're an ONT, an optical network terminal. I have an optical network terminal in my home. Many of you probably do as well. If you have a ISP that provides you with a fiber connection to your home, they bring the fiber right into your house, into your closet. But then how do you connect a fiber on an internet connection to a copper connection that most of us are running inside of our homes? Not me, I have lots of fiber, but I still need to make a conversion between the single fiber link. If you look at the fiber connection coming in from your ISP, it's a single strand. So how do you convert that into something Ethernet that you can use inside of your network? Well, you use an optical network terminal to be able to do that. An ONT, if you do not have a fiber connection, then you probably don't have an ONT. You have a very similar configuration, but for copper connections as they are coming in. So an ONT is exactly what you would have in your home to convert that fiber ISP to copper, but it does not connect different IP subnets within your corporate office. This is only going to be used to connect to an external internet service provider. The answer here, the one that makes the most sense, the only one that makes sense in this particular scenario, is the one that is the router. 39% of you chose router. And that is the connection that we were looking for. A router is what we would have there. An ONT, some of you are saying, isn't an ONT a modem? Modem is an abbreviation for modulator and demodulator. And technically speaking, the ONT does a little bit more than that because the fiber connection coming in from your ISP has a different type of encoding than you would use for Ethernet in your internal network. I know we're going a little bit outside the scope of A+ right now, but just stay with me. So in other words, the ISP is speaking one language, your internal network speaking a completely different language. How do you put something in the middle to change the language? Well, a modem doesn't make any changes to the translations between those two very different topologies. So now we have to have something that really can make that change. The ONT does make that change. If anything, the ONT probably is best associated with a CSU DSU, a channel service unit. This kind of goes back to the older wide area network configurations, but it is making a translation between the ISP's fiber network to the local Ethernet network that you use on your network. It's a relatively simple translation, but it still needs to be translated, and the ONT is doing that for you. So although I think colloquially, we often refer to that, oh, it's the modem. That's the modem that the ISP gave me. And if you called your ISP and you said, I think my modem is broken, it's really your ONT. They know exactly what you're talking about. And they go, no problem. We will get you a new modem out to you. But in reality, it's more than a modem. It's more of a CSU DSU. It's making a conversion when it's bringing this in. But generally speaking, we refer to it as an ONT, an optical network terminal. If you use that terminology, everybody will know what you're talking about. So there you go. There's a little bit inside baseball, maybe a little bit too much detail, but at least you understand why that's a little bit different than us just calling it a modem. Why don't you just call it a modem instead of an ONT? Well, that's why, because technically it's not a modem. Would not be the first time in this industry where we referred to a technology under the wrong name and just kept doing it forever, though. We have a lot of instances with that. I think every industry tends to do that when you work through it. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's see if we can get through one more question, shall we? I would like to get you through another one before we get to the after show. And so I have set one up in a different style of format, certainly, for this. This next question is one from one of my practice exams. If you haven't seen my practice exams before, you might want to have a look at these. When I started looking around the internet at practice questions, both multiple choice questions and performance-based questions, I found a lot of the stuff on the internet was sadly outdated. They were asking questions about technologies we no longer use anymore in our networks and certainly weren't part of the official exam objectives. I also found a lot of questions that were just plain wrong. They would ask you a question, but then the answer they gave you wasn't correct, or the explanation they were giving was nonsensical. I thought, how does anybody study with those practice questions off the internet? So I thought the only way to fix this is to write my own. So I did. I created my practice exams book. This is a 387-page practice exams book for the Core 1. I don't have the other one here for Core 2, but it looks the same for Core 2, just as thick for Core 2. So we have both of those to be able to work through. These have both multiple choice and performance-based questions inside of them. So you get a little bit of everything in there. And the next question I have for you is a question that is from my practice exams book. So, and I think what I tried to do on this one, I say try to do, is I created for you a link to the to Vevox so that you can answer this one online too, which is something we didn't intend to do. So you can follow along on the screen. This is the PDF from my practice exams book. This is question A85. What page is this on? Page 28 of my practice exam A. And the question asks, a workstation has been assigned an IP-IP8 address. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this assignment? Is it that the workstation is not connected to the wireless network, the DNS server is misconfigured, the network is using public internet addresses, or the DHCP server is down? Has to be one of these, right? As always, of course, please, we're not answering questions online. Instead, I put this one also on yourprofessormesser.com/QA. So you can, of course, go out to that link and be able to answer it as well. Let's see if I have that up on my screen here as well. I do. So you can, of course, answer that same question using that link on your screen. Go ahead and lock in what you think the answer is. As always, please, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. A workstation, API-PA, what happens? What's going on here? How can we get this one answered? Those are the questions we have that we're trying to answer in this particular case. I'm going to show you how you would answer this, though, in my practice exams book. So we're looking at this one. Because this is a PDF, we can annotate it. So I'm going to maybe pick a few things on the screen. If I had a stylus, I could write on it, and I can save this. So I could save all my annotations, save the PDF. The next time I load the PDF up, all your annotations will be there. There are no restrictions on this PDF. There's nothing limiting you. You can use this as a, I say, normal PDF when you're working through it. You can also see that if you just wanted to know whether the answer was A, B, C, or D, you could choose those by going to Quick Answer on page 31. I'll tell you if just the answer is A, B, C, or D. But I'd like to show you the full and complete detailed answer. That is on page 122. As I mentioned earlier, I'm currently on page 28. Well, how do you get to page 122? Well, you scroll, 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 scroll. Nobody wants to do that in a PDF. Do not scroll through the PDF. I've already created a link for you, either Quick Answer or the details. Notice it turns into a little hand. That's a link that will take you directly to page 122. And if I get rid of my annotation here, click, turn that off, I can click it, and it goes directly to page 122, just like that. And it tells you the question again, workstation's been assigned an address, and it gives you the possible answers there. The answer here is D, the DHCP server is down. Well, I would like to see here if that really was the answer that you chose in this case. I think we kind of saw a brief glimpse of that. 81% of you chose that that the DHCP server is down. 11% said the network is using public internet addresses. Most networks are not, and that is not what an API-PA address is associated with. 4% of you said the workstation is not connected to the wireless network. That doesn't seem to be the case. And 4% of you say the DNS server is misconfigured. There's no mention of a wireless network here. There's no mention of DNS servers in here. DNS server misconfigurations do not cause an API-PA address here. And in fact, I tell you in my book, the answer is the DHCP server is down, and I give you an explanation of why that right answer is right. Now, I think most practice exams do that for you. But the part that is so crucial and so critical with a practice exam is when you get a question wrong. That's the point of taking a practice exam after all. You're not expecting to get every single question right. You're probably going to get questions wrong. And most importantly, the questions you get wrong are the ones you need to fix in your brain on why you got the question wrong. So if you scroll down a little bit, I document in my book every single correct answer and every single incorrect answer. So if you chose A, the workstation is not connected to the wireless network, I explain why that's not the right answer. If you chose B, the DNS server is misconfigured, I explain why that is not the right answer. And if you chose C, the network using public internet addresses, I also explain why that would not be the right answer. If you didn't understand any of the question or you didn't understand any of the answers, I also have links to the video that I used to create the question so you can watch the video, get a better understanding of what I'm asking you about. Then you can come back to the question and be able to answer this one. This particular question is from the 1201 exam, Objective 2.6, and the video name is Assigning IP Addresses. You can either use the QR code to jump directly to the video, or you can use the link that I provided to be able to either click or to be able to type that in very easily. This set of practice exams is one that once you're done with this question, you've gone through the right answer, you've gone through the wrong answers, and let me recommend to you, by the way, even if you get it right, make sure you read through the wrong answers as well, because they might be the right answer on your actual exam. There's a lot of different topics on this exam, and I make sure that every question and every answer applies to the current set of exam objectives. You're not going to be presented with answers on this exam that have nothing to do with the current exam. Everything complies and meets the same list of objectives that are provided from that official list from CompTIA. Once I'm done with this question, I can click the back button in my browser. Did you know there's a back button in your browser? Mine is up here in the upper left. Yours may be in a different place, but I'm going to click back, click, and it takes me back to where I started, and I can go to the next question that's on my list. Those are my practice exams. We have these available for Core 1 and Core 2. You can find those on our website at professormesser.com/core1pe, or you can simply use the main menu on our website and choose the Core 1 practice exams. That's another great way to support the things that we do here, and we sure appreciate all of the support that you've provided with this. Of course, I've mentioned all this time that we have taken all of these questions and all of these answers directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. These are available for you to download right now. They are a huge list of everything you need to know on this exam. The exam objectives contain bulleted lists of every single topic you need to know for this exam. So you might find sometimes you ask someone about a topic and they say, well, that topic's not on the exam. That's out of scope for the exam. And you're wondering, how do they know that? Because CompTIA has given us a detailed list of everything you could be possibly asked on this exam, and they stick to this list like glue. So if you know every single one of these bullets, you're ready to take your exam. That's why I say this is probably one of the best resources you can get for your exam. This is what you should read through before you start your studies. This makes an excellent checklist before you schedule your exam, and it's a free document. Free. It's free. It doesn't cost any money. It's available directly from the CompTIA website. If you'd like a direct link over to the CompTIA website page for the A+ exam objectives, simply visit our site at professormesser.com/objectives, or you can hunt around the CompTIA website and find them yourself. They are very, very useful. They will provide you with the scope that you need to understand if you really are ready to take this exam. A valuable tool, and definitely one you should put into your list of study resources. We do one of these study groups every month for A+. We actually do 2 A+ live streams every month. We do one for Core 1 and we do one for Core 2. This was our Core 1 study group today, but of course, we have another one scheduled for Thursday. This is Tuesday as we are here live, but 2 days from now, on September the 3rd, we are doing our Core 2 study group. This month, we also have a Network Plus study group on September 9th and a Security Plus study group on September 16th. I've also scheduled our October study groups. Right now, they are scheduled for October the 6th and 8th for A Plus Core 1 and Core 2. We've got October the 14th for Network Plus, October the 21st for Security Plus. So we've got a few to choose from there. And if you are watching this video and it's well after October and you're wondering when is the next live event going to be, follow the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/calendar, and it's always up to date with the latest schedule. I also will tell you that sometimes I've just shown you some dates on the screen. Sometimes these dates change. The chaos that is my life will sometimes require me to make a change to the schedule. And if that does occur, I update it at that link first thing. So if you're looking at the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar, or you're looking at the events channel on our Discord, both of those are updated exactly at the same time. So you will always know where to go to get the latest schedule for what we are doing. Well, we've been doing this for an hour already. Can you believe it? That went by really, really fast. But we've got more to come. Don't go anywhere. I've been asking you questions this whole time. Now's the time for you to ask me questions. It's time for our after show that's coming up immediately after we're done here. Stay exactly where you are to be able to do that. We've got our discount vouchers and free exam hacks ebook at professormesser.com/vouchers. Our A+ course notes are available on our website, professormesser.com/1201success. And of course, if you're on social media, you'll probably see us there at professormesser.com/Discord/X/LinkedIn/Facebook/YouTube/Instagram. You get the idea. Just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us. Well, I think that brings us to the end of another study group. I would say a very successful Core 1 study group. Stay exactly where you are. We're starting our after show in just a few seconds. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, time to get some other things done here. One moment, please, while I take a sip. Somebody in the chat room was asking, are there no other study groups this month? No, there's absolutely study. I showed you the September calendar previously on here. I think I have that list. Let's bring that back up. So there's the September calendar, but I was also showing you October as well. I'm giving you 2 months of study groups, not just 1 month of study groups. You get 2 months of study groups, all happening, all at wherever it has on that calendar. Sometimes I wonder about these dates for study groups. I just never know what's going on. Well, now for the study group purposes, we're now in the after show portion of our study group. The after show, kind of an odd name, of course, to be able to work through it, but the after show is here so that we can answer questions that you may have for us. So the way that you can submit those questions to us is, not surprisingly, using the same link that we've been talking about this whole time. You can go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can, of course, submit questions for us at any time in that after show. In fact, I will put that up so you can see it properly in the after show view. I just have to change my presentation view to be something different so that you can see that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. I will be moderating the questions. So once you submit them, they don't just automatically show up on the live stream. I have them behind the scenes here, and we will, of course, be able to go through them together and see what questions you might have. There's always something interesting. You can ask questions about CompTIA. You can ask them about IT in general. You can ask about technologies. You can ask about anything. You can ask about the weather. You could ask whatever you want there, and being able to set it up. So let's go back to some of the questions you had about some of the Q&A that we did in that first hour. And let's start with one from Jeremy that asks about switches. I mentioned the question about connecting multiple IP subnets to each other and what device we would use for that. And I told you we would use a router for that. And you would use a router for that. You would not use a switch for that. That is not what switches do. Only routers connect IP subnets. Switches connect broadcast domains. So Jeremy's asking, but can't a switch be configured to split the number of ports on it into different subnets? If it is a switch, no, you cannot. Switches do not do this. Switches do not split the ports on it into different subnets. They do not work that way unless you are talking about completely segmenting them into different broadcast domains, which is a little different than the question we asked earlier. So let's say that you wanted to have a group in shipping and receiving on one broadcast domain, and you wanted the accounting department to be in a separate broadcast domain. You could put them into separate VLANs on the same switch, but those VLANs can't talk to each other because the VLANs are separate broadcast domains. Separate broadcast domains can only connect to each other if there is a router in between. So there's our issue. Whenever you want to connect two different IP subnets, you must use a router. You always have to use a router. You cannot use a switch. The problem I think that we get into when we talk about switch connectivity is that term that I mentioned earlier that tends to complicate things. And this marketing term that was created was a layer 3 switch, because the folks at Cisco thought, well, I do have these switches and I have these VLANs that I've set up, but they can't connect to each other. And I don't want to spend money buying a separate router just so I can connect these two different VLANs to each other. What if I put routing code into the switch? So all the switch ports would still be switch ports, but inside the router is effectively a virtual router that would allow me to connect and communicate between both of those IP subnets. Well, that's also a router. A layer 3, whenever you see the terms layer 3, that's a router. So it's not that the switches have suddenly morphed themselves into understanding IP addresses. We've taken this layer 2 MAC address connectivity and somehow magically enabled it to understand IP addresses. That's not what's happening. A switch is still going to be a switch. A layer 3 switch is still a switch. But the layer 3 part is a separate piece that is inside of the switch that is acting as a router. It's effectively the same thing as buying a separate router and putting it right next to it. So that's why I say that you can split a switch. Each individual interface on a switch could be split into a separate VLAN, but none of those VLANs can talk to each other. And our question was really about connecting those different IP subnets together. And the only way to connect IP subnets together is a router. That's what it is. So a layer 3 switch is neither layer 3 nor a switch. It's layer 3 and a switch is really what it is. It's two different components. We call it one thing. It's multiple things. I think I mentioned earlier on in the study group that in our industry, we tend to call things sometimes by the wrong name, and we tend to keep doing it. And so my way to colloquially tell you that this is different is I tell you that layer 3 switches don't exist. There's no such thing as a layer 3 switch. Just so you can kind of get into your mind, oh, those are separate technologies that we're just sort of cramming into the same power supply. That's really all a layer 3 switch is multiple devices that we're cramming in there. It's like saying that a router is a layer 3 firewall because there might be ACL functionality inside of it. So you could play around with these terms all day. Using terms the wrong way and describing devices with them, I think, tend to create more confusion. So we, especially in my courses, say that a switch is a device that operates at OSI layer 2 that communicates by forwarding devices based on a destination MAC address. A router is a layer 3 device, and that is a device that forwards traffic based on the destination IP address. So there's where the difference is. There's no such thing as a switch that can forward traffic by IP address. There's no such thing as a router that can forward traffic by MAC address. We keep those completely separate and different because they are completely separate and different. And just because you call something a layer 3 switch doesn't mean that it's somehow a switch operating at layer 3. Not what's going on there. See how confusing that is? So that's why I try to avoid the confusion and we focus on the functionality instead of focusing on what the marketing people call it. And I think if you stick to that view, it makes it very easy, especially if you're designing networks that have switches with layer 3 capabilities, That's a different design mechanism than having a separate switch and a separate router. So we're going to have to think about that as well. If you have different questions you would like to submit, you can do that at any time. I'd love to answer your question. You can submit it using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your question at any time. That is exactly where it is. Let's go through other questions you may have. Thank you for submitting that one, Jeremy. Going through our list, we'll keep going through here. Let's talk about this one. I think this is a question a lot of people have. So great one to bring up. Tyler, who asks, hello, I'm in trade school at the moment. My exam for 1201 is scheduled for next Wednesday. How timely is that? My fault point has been printers. What's a good way to identify the different types of printers and what they're used for? I don't know if a good way to do it is the best thing to do, but I'll tell you some of the techniques that I use. First, the whole idea of confusion and challenges over printers, I totally understand where you were coming from with that, because at home, these days, we don't even tend to have printers at home. At least that tends to be the theme that I am seeing in a lot of places, that we don't tend to have printers when we are at home. And that's, I think, probably common. There's less and less requirement these days to be able to print things out. We're doing so much now on our phones. I can take a PDF. I can take a picture of a form on my phone, have it converted to a PDF that I'm able to fill in on my phone. I can sign it on my phone, convert it back to a PDF, and then send that to whoever I'd like. So it avoids a lot of the printing and then signing and then having to digitize and send off. It's just a simple way to do it. And so why spend the hundreds of dollars on a printer if you're not going to do that? And at home, we tended to see inkjet printers. We didn't tend to get a lot of laser printers at home, although the price point of those has come down quite a bit. We don't tend to have impact printers really anywhere. Those are very niche these days. So a lot of the printing technologies you have on the exam are things you simply don't touch, you don't see, you've never used before, and it becomes difficult to conceptualize because we've never worked with them before. One of the things I tend to do first is to look at the exam objectives. Let's bring up the objectives about the exam. And the exam's very straightforward. In fact, some people are even putting in the chat right now things that are no longer on the exam. That's why I think it's so important to look at the actual exam objectives. For example, in previous exams, CompTIA went through this whole laser printing process. You had to know every step along the way and the way the internals of the laser printer operated. You'll notice that's not on there anymore. It's gone. You no longer have to know the step-by-step. Well, step 3, step 4, step 5, it's not on there. All you have to know is how to maintain it. Laser printer maintenance, we need to understand how to replace toner, apply a maintenance kit, calibrate, and clean. Technically, all you have to know about a laser printer. I give you a little more background on laser printers in my videos because I think it's useful to know, why do we call them a laser printer? How do they work internally? Even if we don't have to know every individual step, what's going on in there? How do we get from a laser beam to a printed piece of paper? So we do have an overview of that in our videos, but not important to know for your exam. With inkjets, thermal, and impact, there is a little bit more. They want you to know a little bit more about the internals of the device, but not much. For example, an inkjet, you need to know about an ink cartridge, a print head, a roller, and a feeder. That's all you have to know about an inkjet. From a maintenance perspective, how do you clean the print heads? How do you replace the cartridges? How do you calibrate? And how do you clear jams? So you're already halfway through the printer technologies, and you've only learned about 10 different topics. Not so bad. Similar with the thermal, similar with the impact, although, as I mentioned, thermal and impact printers tend to be relatively niche. We don't see a lot of thermal printers. When you do see them, they're things like badge printers or label printers for shipping and receiving. We don't tend to see thermal printers in other places. And impact printers are also pretty niche, where you have a head with pins or a chain with letters that is physically hitting a piece of paper, thereby being an impact. And in there, we just need to know about multi-part paper and how to replace the ribbon, the print head, and the paper. Only 4 things to know for impact. So when you look at previous exams that had maybe twice as much printing information on them, and then you look at the current exam, not quite as bad as what you might think. Notice that the last A+ version had things in there about 3D printers. I don't know why they had things about 3D printers, but they did. They tend to do this sometimes on the A+ exam as they try to catch those rising technologies. But then it turns out that technology never quite gets that actual forward type of movement within a corporate environment. So we tend to see them on one exam and then they drop right off. And that tends to be what happened with 3D technology, 3D printing on the A+ exam. We had it in the previous version. They dropped it in this version because, quite honestly, you don't tend to see a lot of 3D printers in corporate environments. So those are the 4 you need to know. Those are the things you need to know. You don't need to go outside the scope. You don't need to know anything more than what's listed on this list because this is the official exam objectives. That can give you at least some perspective on things that are important to know. And I think if you are working through the different type of printers and what you do with them, how do you then get some context? Because that was Tyler's question, is how do I identify these? How do I know what they're used for? Well, this is why they made Google, quite honestly. We can go out and look at pictures of inkjets, of thermal printers. If you go to YouTube, I'm sure there are plenty of YouTube videos of people taking these apart, of repairing them, working with them, using them. You get a feel for what they do. So I, of course, give you quite an overview in our video series. But there's also other places you can go to gather other details. What are they selling right now at Office Depot? Can you buy a laser printer? I bet you can. How about an inkjet printer? Probably. Do they even sell thermal printers at Office Depot? They do, but you may only find label printers, for example. So that starts to give you some context about the type of printers that are out there and what you may find them being used for. I think you're thinking the right way, Tyler, which is I need to know more than it's just an impact printer. I need to know more than it's just a thermal printer. What do we use this stuff for? How is it used? That is an important question because the exam is going to ask you questions from that perspective. They're not going to tell you or ask you a question about necessarily about an individual component inside a printer. They want you to know how you're using it. So that's my recommendation to you as well, is find out how these technologies are being used, not just printers, but everything that's in the exam objectives. How are we using those? And once you know that, you're ready for the exam. I think that's an important part of this. Let's keep going through this list of questions that you have submitted. Here's an interesting one from a different perspective. Bree asks, are there any study methods you specifically would not recommend? I mean, there's plenty I would not recommend. Anything that has to do with single malt whiskey, not a great study method. Anything that is one where you don't read ever, probably not a good study method. It's probably pretty obvious. The thing that I have found, though, at this point, we have over 1 million subscribers on our YouTube channel. Millions and millions, tens of millions of videos have been viewed. We've talked to people through years and years of these live study groups and talked about study process for a lot of people. And one of the things that I found is that there is no single study method that I could apply to everyone. A lot of people will say, well, why don't you create for us a process, a method where we start at step 1, we go to step 2, we go to step 3, and now we're ready for our exam, which I think would be lovely. The problem is that everybody studies a little bit different. Some people are really good at watching a video and getting everything they need from that video. In fact, that's preferable for them. Some people do not like watching videos. It hurts me when people tell me that. They don't want to watch my videos. But I get it. There's different study methods for everybody. So they like to read a book. Go read the book. Absolutely. Some people prefer doing a lot of practice questions. Some people don't like doing any practice questions. I think if you had to study, I think there are 4 study resources that I think everybody should have that would give them the best possible chance of passing the exam. So here are the 4 that I recommend. The first one, not surprisingly, a good video training course. I know that's a little self-serving, but there are things that I can demonstrate in a video that are so much easier and so much informational and so much more explanational. The explanation I can give in a video, much easier than the explanation I could give if I wrote it in a book. Conversely, the second type of study material that I recommend you get is a book. The ability to put things in a book and have a very dense piece of reading, because the information I can put into a book is much more dense than a video. I can present to you much more information in a shorter amount of time by reading a book than I can in a video. But that's because a video is very different than a book, and it teaches you in a different way. I think you need both of them working together to give you the best possible learning experience. The third thing I always recommend is some hands-on. You need to find some labs. You need to work at a command line. That's why if you go through some of my command line videos in the 1202 series, in the Core 2 series, I try to do all of my videos so that you could pop open a command line on your computer and follow along with me, because I'm pinging things on the internet. I'm connecting to things on the internet. I'm doing a trace route to things on the internet. I'm doing a copy command locally on my machine so that you could try those yourself without hurting anything. So doing something with your hands, watching something as it's happening in real time, putting some input into a system and watching the output that comes out fires some synapses somewhere in there. It locks something in. There's a muscle memory. You have some type of event, and then you have a result from that event. You can actually follow it and watch it and view it. And I think that's an important part of study as well. So those are your three. So far, we got three. We got our videos. We got a good book or more, maybe 2 books. We've got some labs that we did. I offer the CompTIA labs on my website because they're really good. Virtual environments take you through all of these different, there's like bunches of labs that are available there. The fourth thing is the practice exams. Once you've gone through the book, once you've gone through the videos, once you've gone through the labs, how do you know you learned anything? How do you know if you're really ready for yourself for this exam? How do you know if you really were able to capture the nuance of these topics and really understand everything that's expected of you? Practice exams are great for picking out your shortcomings, at least some of your shortcomings. So that's what I would also recommend, is you go and do some practice exams so that you can understand where you know things really well and maybe where you don't know things really well. You're hoping to maybe get a lot of things wrong on a practice exam, because I think that's super important if you're someone who's really looking forward or really hoping to understand more about the way things actually work with these computers. And there really is no other certification out there that is going to give you this information. CompTIA Plus is the one that talks about hardware, talks about operating systems. You learn about the basics of Linux, Mac OS, Windows. You learn a little bit about security, a little bit about networking. It really is a well-rounded primer for almost everything that you'll be doing for the rest of your IT career. So in many ways, I wish that I had everybody using all 4 of those all the time, but I recognize not everybody likes some of those study methods, and not everybody has the resources for all of those study methods. But I think if you're able to get at least 3 or 4 of those, you're positioning yourself to have the best results on any exam, whatever it happens to be. So I don't have any specific recommendations for this is the way you should study, but I think those 4 resources will be a good positioning for almost everybody who's studying for one of these certification exams. Let's keep going through our list of questions. Some of you have put other comments into the list that is here. Thank you for doing that. This is a pretty good one. I want to answer this question. I want to be sure I don't do things I don't want to do with this question. I know that's sort of an odd statement that I am making there, but I have, let's see if I can bring this up. So I have a number of questions. By the way, if you have a question, you can submit those at any time. We still have about 30 minutes left today. So go to professormesser.com/QA, and you could submit that question right now. Just off the, one of the questions I got is, how's the weather? Thank you, Top Hat, for asking how the weather is. It's raining. I just got a notice on my tablet that is in front of me. A lot of you don't see the craziness that is here. This is the studio. This is what I see when I'm working on the live stream. So everything's popping up on my view here. So it tells me whenever there's a weather alert. And as many of you know, we are based in Central Florida. And this time of year, Central Florida is a very busy time in the afternoon for weather. We always have afternoon thunderstorms. Thunderstorms, meaning there is lightning, there is thunder, is a very common part of our afternoons here, that I'm working here, I'm writing, I'm creating content, I'm making questions for the study group, we're doing this, and then I get a message here saying you're about to get a lot of lightning on my laptop, and then everything is shut down. So I've designed the studio so I can shut this down. Everything that we are doing here, you don't really see it here, but there are 19-inch cabinets on the left and right next to me. It's kind of hard to see with the lower third there. There's a cabinet here on my right. A lot of dust, I'm sure. There's a cabinet in here. There's my recorders. There's a cabinet over here that has my switch. It has an old amp for my headphone amp for multiple headphones. I no longer use that. It all goes through my mixer. And then I have the video switchers down here as well. It's a 19-inch rack-mounted switcher. And then I've got my, what I use for audio is this, the DLZ Creator is what I'm using for our audio for this. And that's all we have. I mean, it looks like there's a lot going on here, but in reality, it's like 3 or 4 components. There's a mic, there's a mixer, there's a video switcher. Boom, you're done. Almost fits for anywhere. But because we are here, I'm shutting down the afternoon, and we can unplug everything in this room from the outside world. So as the lightning is rolling through, I can unplug, and I know that everything in here is protected. The lightning would have to come in through the attic and hit the actual desk to be able to cause a problem. Lightning doesn't tend to work that way. So I think there's way too many of me on the screen there, but that is exactly what we are doing here and how that works. So that's how the weather is every day. Now, as we get into the fall, thankfully it's sort of happening now. We tend to see a lot less of that. So I'm a little more productive as we get into the fall because I can finally work all day without having to worry about lightning coming through. So an odd question, but probably an odder answer. So thank you for submitting that. If you ever want an odd answer, I'm here for you to be able to get those on the live stream. Next questions. Let's talk about this. I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of bad practice questions on the internet. And this is a really good example of this and working through it. Mozilla asks on a video that I currently don't have up. There it is. The question is, for troubleshooting questions on the 1201 exam, how do you identify the best answer when multiple choices could technically cause the symptom? Well, there is a very good way to do this. And I think I understand where you're coming from with this, but I think a lot of the challenges, a lot of the confusion around questions on the exam are confusion that has been created by someone other than CompTIA. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of bad practice questions on the internet. And I see people mention all the time, oh, these exam questions on the actual exam are difficult to understand. The CompTIA questions are a reading task more than they are a technical task, or the CompTIA exam questions are so difficult to follow. In reality, the actual exam questions are actually written quite well. They don't have there's not a lot of confusion there. I don't think you'll run into anything on the exam that I would consider to be a trick question or a misleading question. That's because the exam itself is one that kind of focuses on very well written questions. I think what people are finding are some of these third-party sites where the questions are badly written. They are incorrect with their answers. AI has not really helped with this because I see a lot of AI written questions that aren't realistic to what you would find on the actual exam. So when people are going through these practice exams, they're thinking, wow, this exam is almost a different language. It's even written in a weird form, and I kind of have to parse out That's because they're just bad questions that somebody wrote on a third-party website. The actual exam, the questions are very straightforward. If you know your stuff, the correct answer will be very obvious. It will jump right out at you. And you'll know that that really is the best answer. We had a number of these today. I had a number of questions where I asked you, is it this answer, this answer, this answer, this answer? Which one is the best of these? And although you could have perhaps found an answer that could match the question that was being asked, it was obvious that wasn't the right one. There was a much better answer, an obviously better answer that was listed as the one that was really the correct one. This is exactly the scenario you'll find on your exam. So don't worry about this aspect of it. When you get to your exam, the actual answer will be very obvious. The question will be very straightforward. It will be very understandable. You will not have to decipher the language there. Has this always been the way with CompTIA exams? It is not. It has not always been like that. But over the last, 7 to 10 years, they really worked very hard at making the questions very straightforward and very obvious to point you to where the actual answer would be. Now, they're not perfect. There are some questions that maybe could be written a little bit better, but generally speaking, overall, the exam's very straightforward. I don't find that anybody comes out of the exam saying, well, I would have passed had I really understood what they were asking me. Almost nobody says that because the questions really are very straightforward. If you looked at the questions in my self-promotion, I realize, but if you were to read through, I designed the questions in my practice exams book to be very, very, very similar to the same style and the same tone and the same cadence as the actual exam questions. And I don't think there's anything in here you could point to and say, that's a trick question, or I don't understand what you're asking. They're all relatively straightforward. A lot of the questions we give in our study groups, the ones we did today, are very similar to the style and tone. Maybe not quite as difficult because that's not what we're trying to do in our study groups. We're trying to learn the technology here. We're trying to test our knowledge of the technology with the practice exams. So I would say the practice exams are slightly more difficult, but in some cases, they're almost the same from that perspective. So that's where I would focus my efforts is don't worry about, am I going to understand the question? Are there trick questions? None of that is the case. The questions are very straightforward. And the ones that ask you to find the best answer, it really is very obvious what the best answer is. So do not worry about that part. You will find yourself going right through the exam and having no problem understanding the questions or the answers that are being presented to you. Next on our list, let's keep going through here. Here is a common question we get and certainly worth talking about. This is from Chris, who asks, what would you say are the most important course topics to review before your exam? This is one that is a challenge because I can't point you to any. Because there isn't one. There isn't any that are the most important over another. And let me explain why. Let's go back to our exam objectives. If you're not tired enough of me talking about the exam objectives yet, everything in this objectives could be asked of you on the exam. Just so you're aware, when you sit down for your A+ exam, you get a randomized list of questions that has been created just for you for that specific exam sitting. If there were two people in the exam room, you both walked in at the same time, you both started your exam at the same time for the Core 1, they would be completely different exams. Now, there might be some questions on one exam that might show up somewhere else on a different exam, but because these are being pulled from a very large group of questions, you're going to get a completely different distribution of questions than anybody else has gotten on this exam. I think probably statistically, we all get a unique exam every time we sit down. Every time somebody starts an A+ exam, they're taking an exam that nobody else has taken before. Now, the exam questions themselves are different for every sitting. So let's say you go take an exam and you don't do well. Maybe you didn't prepare. Maybe you didn't even know there was exam objectives. Maybe you didn't realize how difficult the exam was. You didn't pass. That's okay. You bought a retake voucher and you can take it again. You don't have to pay again. If that's the case, when you take the exam the second time, and people have come back to me and mentioned that they weren't ready for this, when you take it the second time, it's a completely different exam than you had the first time. Every time you sit down and take an A+ exam, it's a different random set of questions than the last time this exam was taken. So that's why I tell people any of those random questions can come from any of these bullets that are in any part of the exam objectives. And there are hundreds and hundreds of bullets in here. And so you have to be prepared for every single one of these topics. The only way that we can get some type of distribution from this is on the second page of the exam objectives. And it tells us in mobile devices, 13% of your questions are going to come from domain 1 mobile devices. So if we were to look at domain 1, here's domain 1. It's a single page. 13% of your exam will be these bullets. So if there are a maximum of 90 questions on the exam, you're probably going to get 10 to 12 questions about mobile devices, all from these bullets. Okay, so at least we know how many we're getting from this section. Section 2, domain 2 networking, 23% of the exam, which means on your exam, that's going to be about 20 to 21, 22, somewhere in there. I'm trying to do the fraction math in my head. So you're going to need to know 20 or 22 different topics from section 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, and 2.8. But there's a lot of bullets there. There's probably 5 times as many bullets than there are questions we would get. So there's a good example of how you have to know everything in this list if you want to properly be prepared for the exam, because they could ask you anything from this list. So there's not a single set of questions. There's not a single set of topics that I would consider more important than others, because statistically, you could be asked anything. So every topic is an important topic. Every section is an important section. Every technology is an important technology, as long as it is listed specifically in the official CompTIA exam objectives. So just keep that in mind, and I think you'll do fine. It's not a great answer because I just told you have to know everything. But then again, there's no easy button for this certification. If it was easy, we'd just all have our A+ by now. This is one where we really have to know the content. We really have to know these bullets. We have to understand how these technologies are used. They are presented to you on this exam in a way that really tests your understanding. And so you never know what you're getting. And so there's never any one thing I can point you to. You have to know all of it. There is no easy button. Oh, sad that there is not. But there is not an easy button on this one. Let's talk broader about these exams. This is a question from that asks really a common one we get, but one we really should think about. We should step through this. I just passed my Network Plus exam yesterday, and I'm trying to figure out if Security Plus is the next logical step. What is your take on that? Should I go for the Security Plus, or should I go for something else? Most people look at the CompTIA exams, at least look at them as the top 3 most popular certifications as being A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. And there's some validity to that. Those are 3 very popular certification exams in our industry, but not every employer is looking for every certification. Some employers love certifications and they prefer that you have a certification. Some employers don't really care that you have a certification and don't even ask for one. Now, that may be purposeful from the perspective of the employer. They may be wanting to hire people that are well-trained, that know their stuff. They're willing to pay for those people. They're willing to get them in the seats right now. They realize they'll probably have to give them a little bit of a higher salary to be able to get them in place. But that is one where they want the cert, and they put on the job description, we want you to have an A+, a Network Plus, and a Security Plus. They just list it out for you. There's some employers that come at this from a different perspective. And it's a perfectly valid perspective, is they want to hire people that do not have certifications. They're willing to train you as you go. That also means they can probably offer you less for a salary. See the difference? It's a business decision. So do I want people just hitting the ground running? I got to pay them to hit the ground running. Do I train them as we go? We'll probably take a little bit more time to get up to speed. That also means I don't have to pay them as much. There's good reasons for doing either one of those things. Most organizations are probably somewhere in the middle of that, where they want you to have one of those certs. We would love you to have the A+. We would love you to have Security Plus. You see this a lot with jobs that are based around the federal government in the United States. So if you're looking at a job that's in DC, it's in Virginia, it's in Maryland, it's in that area of the federal government where we tend to have a lot of jobs, or it's for an organization that is a federal contractor, for example, they probably want you to have a Security Plus. They're very big on the Security Plus. That's an important certification for them. They don't care if you have an A+. They don't care if you have Network Plus. They want you to have Security Plus, for better or worse. Now, they may also add other certifications in there as well, but they may require you to have a Security Plus. So that's a very good example where an employer really is focusing on a very specific cert. So if you want to decide what's my next step, I cannot answer that for you because there's a lot of variables there. What do you want to do with your IT career? What part of IT interests you the most? Are you interested in databases? Do you like security? Are you interested in networking? Are you all about the packets? Are you interested in designing networks? Do you want to work with Linux? Do you want to do a lot with a Windows? Are you interested in Active Directory infrastructures? Do you want to design? Do you want to troubleshoot? Do you want to travel? Do you want to work from home? There's all these different variables. There's all these things that come into play. And so whenever I talk to people about what should I do as my next step, I don't know the answer to that because I don't know what you want to do. And I don't know what employers are in your area. For example, if you lived in DC, if you lived in Washington, DC, I would almost automatically say, are you seeing jobs out there asking for Security Plus? Are you interested in Security Plus? Do you have your Security Plus? Because I think that cert has a lot of juice. It has a lot of power, has a lot of pull in that particular geographic area. But if you lived in Minneapolis, there might be a whole different emphasis up there. And sometimes that emphasis is based around the biggest employers in that area. So if you are in Orlando, it's probably a different set of certifications that are being requested than if you live in Chicago. That's something that you have to take into account depending on your specific geography. And it does change depending on where you are, not just the location within the United States, but also outside the United States. Some countries, CompTIA exams are popular. In some countries, Cisco exams are popular. In some countries, Amazon exams are popular. It just depends on what is popular in that particular area. So there's no single answer I have for you. It all depends on a couple of things. I would recommend looking at the job market in your area and really understanding the job market in your area. It is remarkable to me when people ask this question of me, and I ask them, what is the most popular certification being asked for in your geographic area? They say, I don't know. Like, how can you not know that at this point? You have to know that. So you have to go find that. There's your homework. You have to go figure that part out because understanding the job market in your area is an important part of your strategy here. You have to understand what employers want you to have. You have to somehow balance that with what you want to do. And then at the end of the day, you get to decide which direction you go based on those things. That may be very obvious, or it may be something you weren't ready for. It may be something you didn't know about, but you have to know that. And I have a video, I think it's in the YouTube video description of this video, which is how to get a job in IT with no experience. And I talk about going through that process, building a spreadsheet where you're going through every possible job in your local geography that you think you qualify for and writing down what type of formal education do they want, what type of certifications would they like to see, what technologies are they mentioning, what other types of things do they want me to have, and then you're mapping that out for every open position in your area. At that point, you had a nice database where you can at least start doing some correlations. Were there a lot of people asking for Security Plus? Maybe nobody asked for Security Plus, and surprisingly, everybody asked for Network Plus. Maybe people are asking for a Microsoft certification. Maybe there's something out of left field you weren't expecting. But the only way you would know is if you do a little bit of research. It doesn't take long to do it. Especially, you probably know the biggest employers in your area. And if you don't, that's an easy Google search to get that piece of it. So that's what I would recommend. Find out what the market is in your area. This is a strategy. It's a battle. You're battling every single other person looking for a job right now. So you need to be more strategic than they are. You need to not only find the right jobs, find the right skills, understand the certifications expected, earn those certifications, but then you also have to come up with a strategy on what you're going to do when you get into the interview room. What do you talk about? Well, I discussed some of those things as well in my video, How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience. So you might want to look at my recommendations too, where I try to take you through the entire process from beginning to end and some of the most important things you should be considering at every step along the way. It's a 30-minute video. And in this world, that's a big video. That's a long video for people to watch. But if you're familiar at all with my video series, you know there's no fluff in there. There's no lack of information. I'm not telling jokes the whole time. This is information point, information point, information point, information point. We go through the entire thing. It just takes 30 minutes for me to do it. So I apologize if that is a little extended, but we try to cover everything in that video. Watch it at 2x speed. Maybe that'll speed things up. Then it's only 15 minutes long. Look at that. We saved time already. We worked through the details of that and saved a little bit of time. Let's get through some more questions for you. We've got more here in this list. Let's see what other questions you have. This is a pretty good question. I'm going to go through some nuance here. Having been in this industry for a little while, Kent asks, "Hi, Professor. I've just turned 62 last month. I decided to try to go back into the computer field, learning about the CompTIA A+ 1201 and 1202. Is there an age limit in learning?" I don't think there is. Just thought I'd ask. The thing that I most often find, and maybe it's not that you're 62, maybe you've been working in a different industry for a while and you want to move into IT. This is a question I get a lot as well, where people, they are in law enforcement, they want to go into IT. They're in construction, they want to get into the world of IT. They've been working in transportation, or they've been doing, some other vertical. They work in healthcare. They now want to work in IT. And when you're coming into this business and you are a little bit older, and 62 is a little bit older, but even if you're changing career direction, and you're a little bit younger, maybe you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and you're looking to make a change, this is a pretty big change. You have already established probably a pretty knowledgeable place in the current job that you have, in the current market that you have, the vertical that you are currently working in. So let's say you're in healthcare. You know a lot about healthcare. You've been doing it for 10 years. You're very familiar with the process. You work at the hospital. You work with the doctor's office. You do whatever you're doing is in healthcare. And you now want to move into IT. When you're a little bit older, there is a challenge. There is ageism. This is a real thing. This happens. You go into an interview and they're looking at you thinking, I'm going to put a 62-year-old person on the help desk. Is this what I'm going to do? I don't know if that's the best use of this. They're up for retirement in 3 years. I don't know that we're going to invest time and money in training a person to get them into a higher level IT position if in 3 years they're just going to be ready to retire. So there is a little challenge there in making people understand, no, I'm serious about this and I want to get into this job and it's something that interests me and I'm really excited about it. But when you're a little bit older, no offense, you're also a little bit more familiar with the way the world works. You know that there are ways that you can do things and not do things. You know there are ways that you could do things easier, perhaps, than you were when you were first getting into the job market. And I often tell people, when you have already been working in a particular role for 10 years, you've already created some contacts. You have professional people that you know. You need to take advantage of this knowledge that you have with these connections to all of this. You want to really have an understanding of where my resources are. Who can I go to? So let's take healthcare, for example. You've been working as a phlebotomist. You don't want to be on that side of healthcare any longer, working directly with the patients. You would much rather be interested in how you store large amounts of imaging and network that all together and keep the hospital running. And that's the way you keep people healthy. Well, in that particular case, You should use this knowledge that you have built over these last 10 years. This healthcare knowledge you have is very valuable. Trust me, IT departments would love to have someone working there who understand the business side. This, by the way, is a huge chasm for IT organizations everywhere, is that in IT, we tend to think in bytes. We tend to think in network speeds. We tend to think in video resolutions. But we often forget what the business is doing. So if you work for an insurance company, you're trying to make sure that people are planning for the future. They have a good financial direction that they're going into. They're saving money for the future. They're protecting themselves and their assets for the future. Insurance is an important thing that everyone should have. But we're so focused on how do I get these upgrades on the Windows server pushed out, we often forget, oh yeah, we're helping people with their long-term financial planning. So how do you blend together the world of technology and the world of whatever it is that your organization does? I think hospitals is a great place to do that, where you have a knowledge of how people's health, how we can keep people healthy. Well, then how do I apply the technology on top of that? That's the part that many IT organizations simply do not have. We hire a lot of technology people. We do not hire a lot of business people. And so you'll find wherever you happen to go, you'll see this pop up all the time, that how do we get a better understanding of the business? How do we blend together the requirements from technology and match the requirements from our business side? And how do we make all of that work together? The good CIOs, the central information officers for your organizations, those are the people that are doing a great job at blending those things together. They're very good at understanding both sides of this. They're very often business people that have a technical acumen, and they can blend together all of this. Get those smart technical people, get the smart business people, and make them all work together. That's a great place to be. If you can find a place like that, they're rare, but they are great places to be, because everybody's working on the same goals. Everybody's working at the same pace, doing the same things. There's not a lot of conflict between the business and the technology. And when there is, we can easily resolve it because we know we're all working towards the same thing. That is something that also, and somebody mentioned this in the chat room, turns out the computers have no idea what your age is, thankfully. This is the case where the computers know what you tell them. This could be a child giving them information. It could be a 62-year-old by the name of Kent that is providing that information. The computer doesn't know. So that's a great benefit. Because if you've ever worked in an industry like medicine, like transportation, like finance, you know there's differences in ages and how those ages are understood by the rest of the organization. Technology doesn't have that. You can be just as good an engineer at 20 as you are at 60. And that's really the difference, is that we have to convince people of that. So the things that you have done, I mentioned staying within the same vertical market. So if you work in a hospital, go to your hospital's IT department. They're going to be very interested in getting somebody on board who understands the business side of things. The other part I'll tell you is you've made some really good technical and professional connections through the years. So you know a lot of people in the hospital. You know a lot of people in management in the hospital. You might even know a lot of the people that work in the IT department. You should be talking to them immediately about your goals, your career goals. Hey, I'm interested in working more on the IT side. I'd like to move from the phlebotomist to be more of a technician. I love networking. What would you recommend I do if I wanted to get a job working in networking here or with some of these other organizations around the area? What would you recommend? That's a great way to pose it, so they can give you kind of a broader perspective, and then you can drill down from there. Knowing these people is important because you have connections you've made that somebody just out of college doesn't have. Talk to the people at your church. Talk to the people at your local club. Talk to the people at wherever you do. If you golf, talk to the people at the golf club. If you are part of a musical group, maybe you have something else that you work with in another group. Talk to everybody you know. Say, I'm looking for a technical job. Do you know anybody who hires, who has a foothold in IT, who knows people, who works through those things? That's what you should be doing. So there's value there as well. You should be able to use, I say it kind of badly this way, don't take it as a using of someone. You should be able to take advantage of these relationships that you have built through the years. And very often people would love to help you. So that's the benefit of having friends in the industry. You would be able to ask them for information and for a favor, and they're happy to help you out with this type of thing. So focus on that piece as well. I think it is a challenge to get into any industry at an age of 62, but it's absolutely doable with IT, and something that, I mean, I'm not 62, but it's not going to be long, brother. So if I can keep track of all this technology and be involved in it and be excited about it and every day read the news on it and see what the latest things are going on and watch as technology is changing under my feet, trying to keep up with the latest trends, and that's exciting to me. I love doing that. And as someone who's a problem solver and somebody in IT and somebody who's a technologist, I think that is something that everybody should really be focused on and trying to learn more about, because I think that's what keeps us interested in what we are doing. And what better job than IT to be doing something different every day, something where your job is almost evolving constantly. I mean, this is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is we're learning these technologies with these certifications now. Once you get the certification, oh, you're not done. It's sort of like leveling up to the highest level. You get your certification, you think, I finally hit level 60. I'm done leveling. And then we go, oh no, now their game really starts. Now you have a lot that you have to do in constant motion. You're constantly learning at this point. There's never a time in our industry where you're ever just sitting around and not learning anything. You're always learning something new because there's always something new to know. So I think if you're someone who is working towards any job, whether you are 20, whether you are 40, whether you are 62, doesn't matter. You need to be focused on what that final goal is. You need to understand what excites you about this and find an organization that is just as excited as you are. There will probably be more no's as you are going through this process when you are older than when you are younger. Although maybe it balances out, because a lot of the no's you get when you are younger are because you are not, you don't have the experience yet. A lot of the no's that you get when you're older are people that don't understand what you're trying to do. And I think that's an easier way to work when you can help people understand your goals than trying to convince somebody that you know things that maybe you haven't experienced yet. So if anything, I think you're in a better place now at 62 than you might have been that if you were 20, 21 and just getting out of college, or 22 or 23 in my case. It took me a while. I was not a great college student. So I'm kind of happy now thinking about what can I do next in technology in my later years in this industry than in my previous. It's difficult. I love the idea of learning, and I love that there's something new all the time. It just has to be one where you can convince someone else that that is something that is viable. And I think if you have the right connections and you have the right knowledge and you have the right strategy with this, I think that's something you can do. I think that's absolutely feasible, whether you are 22, 42, or 62. Absolutely doable, and something you can absolutely go through. This, we're now at the top of the hour. I think that's probably a great place to finish up, especially since I can now hear the thunder in the background. I mentioned earlier in the study group in Central Florida, we get the afternoon thunderstorms. They're here. So now it's probably a good time, maybe shut the lights down a little bit, unplug for just a moment, see where the lightning is in my area, and make sure that we're able to do one of these again. Speaking of which, we're doing another one of these in 2 days. If you're here live on a Tuesday, we're doing another study group 2 days from now on Thursday, same time, same place. This will be our Core 2 A+ study group. And if you come back next week, we've got our Network Plus study group, and the week after that's our Security Plus study group. There's always something going on. You can always find out what the next thing is by going to our website, professormesser.com/calendar. I think that probably is the best place to go at any time to find out what we're doing. I'll be over on Discord afterwards, along with a lot of you as well. Thank you for joining us on the Discord. That'd be a great place to go, not only to network with myself and others here, but also everybody else who's studying for their A+. A lot of smart people over on the Discord, and we sure appreciate all of you for being there. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.